Hey, Ryan.
Hey Steve, great to be with you for Free for All Friday.
Not Friday anymore, but it's all good. Yeah, it's fun. We had a few weeks now where we've been able to rotate through our resources during the week, and so now Thursdays become the day for all this stuff. So it's been cool to see the prayer session last week, and then the theology time as well as the mental health time. So now we get to be back together.
Yeah, super excited for today. Really good friend, coach, mentor, a guy who's always taken some time to pour into us. Sometimes people ask, who helps you guys? Who coaches you guys? And one of the men in both our lives for years now, who's done that consistently for our church. Our church is a better church because of this guy. Ton of wisdom, and so really excited to bring our guest in today.
Yeah, so Jay Desko serves at the center, and he'll share a little bit more about that with us as we bring him on. But why don't we go ahead and just welcome Jay in? So, hey, Jay, how are you doing?
Hey guys, I am doing well, thanks. Yeah, and in the midst of a hot week and a hot year, all things considered, I'm doing great.
That's awesome, man. And you're coming to us from PA?
PA, from my back in my office, we moved back in a week and a half ago. We moved our consulting team in, and so we are kind of up and running again. Not everything virtual right now, so
You have quite the snazzy office there, Jay. I'm in my
thank
office.
you.
It doesn't look nearly as nice as your
I
office.
know, we got this new office, and these were the original brick walls of a pants factory from the early 1900s, and they kind of left the walls intact for our suite of offices. And so I always love to think of what took place in these spaces.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's like our building here with the old Thomas's English Muffins factory, and it smells a little different now. But uh, So yeah, man, hey, thanks so much for coming on, Jay. Ryan, mentioned in just the intro just the huge blessing that you have always been to our church, and even before we were an independent church, you have been a great friend in ministry and have taught us so much and continue to. And so Ryan mentioned it, but we are a much better church because of you and your love for our church and the church. And really thankful for you joining us today, man.
Great to be with you. Loving, raving fan of Emergence. I love what you guys are doing. I talk about Emergence a lot, and I really think Emergence is God's done some cool things up in North Jersey because of the courageous actions of you guys and sacrificial decisions you've made. So I love Emergence and love what it stands for.
Jay, and I'm really excited today because you bring a bit of a unique perspective in that you serve on a pastoral team at a local church, and yet you're also a church consultant, right? Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna. Maybe one of the few in the industry that hasn't committed moral failure. You chose to do it as a first love.
No comment.
It's so nice to talk to you because you understand local church, but you have a bigger view than most pastors get because of your consulting gift. And so you see not just what's happening in your local church, because a lot of pastors can get tunnel vision there. You see, here's trends, here's things that's happening around the country. And so really excited to talk with you today about what's happening locally as well as globally as people navigate the current season.
Yeah, Jay, for people to even just understand, because outside of the ministry, the local church ministry world, a consultant to churches is probably a little bit of an abstract concept for folks. But what do you spend a lot of your time doing? What does the center do, and what's your role in the middle of that?
Yeah, the center's in our 19th year, and we are a nonprofit consulting group, which makes us a little unique. So, we don't charge fees to pay my daughter's college bill. We charge fees to pay expenses, and we consult for churches, nonprofits, and businesses, and those that have a values-centered approach to what they do and how they do it. And actually, it's interesting. There's a lot of cross-pollinating that takes place. Things that you learn, at times helping a faith-based business really can have some application in the church world, and vice versa. Things that we've learned in the church world have helped some businesses. So, when you look at it, organizations have a lot in common, and people and structures and mission. And so we basically provide consulting services throughout the U.S. and Canada, have a team of about 15, and we focus on helping organizations be as healthy and effective as they could possibly be.
And I know we've really benefited from your services over the years in so many ways. Ryan and I have both done personal development coaching through the center. We've leaned on you guys for insights and surveys and helping us understand where our church is at, as well as personnel connections. And in so many ways, it's been such a help, and you guys are a blessing to the church. One of the reasons that we wanted to have you in today is just because of the unique spot where the church is right now. Well, the world is, but the church as well as part of that in this time of seeing what the effects of this pandemic and kind of the environment that we're all in right now of really untrodden territory. And this is a new spot for a lot of churches, and we've tried to learn from you guys and others as to what this means in this pandemic world and in all that we're wrestling through. But that's one of the reasons we wanted to have you on, is just to be able to hear from you and what you're seeing, and also just be able to understand more of what are the different aspects of this whole culture and trial that we're walking through that churches are responding to. So when you're interacting with churches right now, what are you seeing across the board in our country, in the nation? What are some of those factors that have become issues?
Yeah, it seems to me, and maybe I could start with this, like when this happened, and started in early March to mid-March, from then until now, it feels to me like organizations, and especially churches, have gone through, if you remember Elizabeth Kubler-Ross years ago, the stages of death and dying in her book on death and dying. And it feels like we're going through these iterations and stages. And, it started out the first couple of weeks, including me and everybody else, was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, we're packing up offices, sending people home. We're going to be out of the office for a couple of weeks. I mean, the next thing you know, I'm coming over to the office, taking food out of the fridge, and what started out as a couple of week crisis and shock, and then we went through this next phase of iteration where, around the country and even locally, there was a lot of humility and networking. Hey, what are you guys doing? And we want to kind of make sure we're all talking. The kind of stuff you wish the churches did more of anyway. And our consultants were getting a lot of calls, and what's that church? What are you guys learning? What are you hearing? And we'd get calls at the church, and our staff were talking to other churches. It was just it was a good season. Still there, but I called it a season for a reason. I think after that, you're starting to see like this, we got to be first to market. We got to come up with a cool idea, and we are going to do something really special that nobody else is doing. And then we're going to blog about it and post it on social media to remind people that we really are still cool and in the game. And I say that somewhat sarcastically. I mean, there were some good things done. Even our own church did some really neat things for area hospitals and stuff like that. But I think everybody was trying to find something to do because they weren't doing a lot of what they used to do, right? And so they wanted to make sure that they were doing something meaningful, and food banks and food pickups and all sorts of stuff was happening. And then they started to kind of go into their new normal, and the new normal was back to independence and less interdependence. And when churches started to open up, there wasn't any collaboration in a region to say, hey, let's think about how to do this wisely together. It was like every man for themselves, and next thing you know, announcements are popping up all over. We're opening, we're going for it, we're in, we're starting this Sunday, we're starting next Sunday, and so that's where I think we are now. Everybody's kind of found the shock phase is over. They're still finding their new normal. but they're back to pretty significant independence, which the church is notorious for, especially in the West. And so I think that that's kind of the trend that I've seen a little bit around the country. And so that's why when Andy Stanley comes out with his announcement, like, a week ago, it felt so unique because, he was doing something as they are known to do, countercultural, when everybody else either bravely, sometimes maybe a little bit, a few of them arrogantly, sometimes some of them cautiously, but they felt like it was time to open up, to go back. And that was fine because that's a judgment call, right? There is no right or wrong on that. But it became such a stream that it turned into a flood. And to hear Andy Stanley say, we're not doing that, I just found refreshing. It was like somebody said, look, we don't think that's what's best for our ministry. We don't think we can do it based on the values of our ministry. So they made a values-driven decision, and I thought that was pretty courageous. Not that everybody had to follow the same track, but it was countercultural. So that's kind of what I see happening.
Jay, and one of the things about being in New Jersey is, we were so hard hit that the opening kind of spree, we weren't really part of it. I mean, it may just be beginning where some churches are just coming back, and yet, what do you think is maybe not helpful when that process doesn't happen in collaboration, or what is the church, maybe not helpful isn't the right word, but what do we miss out on together?
I feel like when you're in a war, there's benefit to having a shared vision and a unified strategy. And if it's not national, which that probably wouldn't be feasible, but it would have been really cool to see that locally manifested, where even if I've even said, wouldn't it have been cool if we could have, and we have such great relationships with churches in our area, you know what I mean? And my church and the other church, like there's a lot of really good churches, and they're good leaders, they're good guys. Wouldn't it have been great if we could have all sat down and just said, let's figure out how to do this together. We're going to send a message that the body of Christ is doing something in unison. I don't think that would have been easy to do because then you have to deal with boards of, the different boards. And as we know, this has become a very polarizing issue. And then mixed on top of that, the race issues that are now taking place. So if the church is ever ripe for polarization and conflict, we're in it. In fact, here's the way I phrased it. Just like COVID has struck the most vulnerable people who already have weaknesses and vulnerabilities in their health and whatnot, I think the same thing is going to be true in organizations, businesses, nonprofits, and churches. Those that are vulnerable, some of them will not make it through this. Some will come out of it, but be very, very much weakened and compromised. But those that have positioned themselves in the healthiest and strongest way possible are probably more likely to come out of this. Some of them probably even better. But some will not survive it. That's true in certain industries and fields and professions, certain types of nonprofits. In higher education, the analysis was before COVID, I think it was 10% out of 1,000 private colleges would close in 5 years. And once COVID hit, the analysts said that would go to 20% in 2 years.
Wow.
So now those schools were already weakened. Do you know what I mean? Because higher ed was experiencing a tsunami. But now that tsunami is affecting everybody. And so I think that some churches are going to come out of this much stronger, and some of them are probably going to come out much, much weaker.
Jay, in the ones where you see some strengthening, even right now, or where you get the sense from hearing what you're hearing that there is a strengthening because of all this, what are some of those things that you think contribute to that strengthening going through this crisis?
One of those would be just a truly high level of trust and shared vision that they have as a group, meaning they truly are in it together. They were in it deep together. And so that you got to remember, shared vision can carry people through a lot of challenges. I just got done, reading a book about Crazy Horse and General Custer, and the book followed their personal development from childhood to adulthood to when they met on the battlefield. And Custer fought in the Civil War, and then he fought out west, and and Crazy Horse was quite a warrior himself. And it was fascinating. One of the things that kept groups together, like in the Civil War, as well as kept certain tribes of Indians together, was they had a common purpose. And that common purpose, Crazy Horse was able to unify more conflicted tribes together to fight one last battle than I think anybody else was able to do. Yeah, these are the guys that are usually fighting against each other, but he was able to pull them together. And so I think we often forget we're in a spiritual battle, and there has to be that shared vision. The other thing is nimbleness, the ability to pivot quickly and make change quickly. I can tell you, one of the best things that's going to come out of COVID is churches have been given a opt-out card of penalty for experimentation more now than ever before. So here's an illustration of that. My church, we're doing outdoor services. We started with 3, saying we're going to do 3 weeks and then phase maybe back in. After we thought through that more thoroughly, we said, it's going well. People love it outdoors. Outdoors feels good. It gives us more time to think through things. Let's utilize the weather that we have. So we're staying outdoors longer. Now, if I had said, hey, before COVID, let's do outdoor services. Let's rent equipment. Let's figure out parking. Let's not do childcare. Let's do set up and tear down in 95-degree weather. People would have said, you're nuts, right? But the reality is that's not nuts anymore. That's okay. That's actually accepted. It's good. And that's one illustration. You guys did Church on the Mound, which I think was, I love the phrase. That is such a cool, Church on the Mound in a baseball stadium. That is so cool. And I was just telling, some of my staff about that last week, and you guys did that. I said, that's innovation. You innovated, you pivoted, right? You probably weren't planning to do that and spend money on, that you didn't have to spend if you could have been indoors. But it forced us to innovate. And I think that the churches that are nimble are going to come out of this the best, because they're just going to keep pivoting all along. We're not done that. We're not done making changes. I think we have a lot more changes yet to come that we can't even imagine right now. We went from thinking this is 2 weeks to thinking this might be a month. Let's flatten the curve. And we realized this is a very, very, very long curve with a lot of flattening to do. And so I think, we realize that there's going to be more changes yet to come. How we do online. How do we make online be viewed as real church and not Plan C? You know what I mean? So I'm pretty excited about that. For you say, what excites me the most? I think innovation will come. And I think the gospel will be strengthened by that innovation that would never have come without pressure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know for us, you said every church is trying to figure out what's our thing. How are we going to address this? And, for us, we pivoted quickly to everything online and all kinds of resources. And, every day, literally, there was new stuff going out. And, each phase has been different, trying to look at it and go, okay, this is a totally different phase. And now screen fatigue is huge. And, people are tired of just looking at screens all the time. They're not all just sitting at home now that the weather's gotten warm and people are out. So how does that all affect ministry? So nimbleness is always, important, but for sure moving forward, that's one of the things where it's like, man, we don't even know how this is going to feel in the next phase.
Well, and I'm looking at it, Steve, like there's 3 groups of people in most churches. This is oversimplification. About a third of them were like, why'd you ever close to begin with? Right? Like, what's wrong with you? Are you living in fear? That's the phrase churches will hear, right? We are not called to fear as Christians. And that's okay. That's a fair reminder. The second group are those that are cautious, but they are interested in eventually coming back to something in a physical location. And the other third is they're not going anywhere soon. Like they're perfectly, like we've succeeded. Like we've succeeded, and now we're going to have to live with that success a year from now, 2 years from now, right? But some people really have realized, no, I actually can do well online. My family's happy, my kids are happy. Some other people need that fellowship, right? When those who come to church for relationship, they are the ones that want to be back the fastest. Those that have that relationship being met elsewhere and don't go to church for relationship, they go for maybe music or hearing teaching, they're getting that online. That group is not in any rush because there's not an urgent need. The urgent need comes from those who feel that they are missing relationship. And I'm breaking that up into groups of a third.
Yeah, we just did our first COVID survey over the past week, and it was interesting seeing those results. Like you said, I mean, it's pretty well split, down the middle for us. People who, and it was a good, intergenerational, reflection as well, because we had, a lot of people from all kinds of age categories giving input, and I was surprised actually to see that there wasn't so much variation across ages.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty standard across the board. About half of folks who are saying, hey, we'd come back pretty quickly, and half folks that are saying, no, we're either not coming back for a very long time, or we're gonna wait and see, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's implications in all of that. So, what does that mean for people who are serving and volunteering? I mean, in some ways, we've talked about how this is an opportunity for the church to, in some ways, relaunch. As we start to open up facilities again, it's almost like a replanting in some ways, because there has been such a break from the norm, and it's a totally new shift now.
Yeah.
Steve and I have been saying all the stuff for years we wanted to fix about our church, but never had time. It finally feels like we can fix some of it. And then there's just this little piece in the back of my mind that's going, but it might be a very long time till we get back to this. I mean, I've been telling our staff emotionally, if you're prepared for, June 2021, you might not end up disappointed. You can only be encouraged. And because I don't, how churches work, November, December, January, you start to get into that peak attendance run, and we're packed then. I don't know how that looks. And now I think the hardest thing coming in the future for us is when we can really begin to come back, how to ramp that up. Because from what I'm hearing, it's not like churches that have come back are even seeing that many folks.
No, you're spot on with that, Ryan. I haven't heard, our consulting team has not heard of any church thriving back in person. I mean, at best, I think at best might be 50%, but I think that's the exception. We've heard of churches that had 8 people show up. You've heard of churches that have, a church of 150 has 8 or 10. We've had some that have 25 or 50. We haven't heard of any getting anywhere remotely close to where they were, and probably for good reason, right? That probably wouldn't be a good thing anyway, to have that many people show up. So I think, as you said, Ryan, you're having a chance to fix things and work on things, and that's what I love about you guys. My greater concern is, I think too many leaders might say, well, we're just going to wait and see, and then and I'm thinking, no, you don't wait and see, you strike. This is our opportunity to strike, to fix things, to innovate, to try, experiment. You have the mission now. This is not a time for a hold back. I think that would be missing the opportunity. That every crisis is opportunity as well, right? And this crisis has given us an opportunity, and I would hope leaders don't miss that opportunity to try some things and make some courageous changes, because in some ways they have more permission now than they're ever going to have.
Jay, you alluded to this before, but just specifically, what do you think? I mean, a lot's changed and a lot's going to be different, but what do you think are just, a couple of the top things that you really think after this phase? And again, are going to be exactly the same, you know. So, what do you think is going to be some marked differences in the local church at the end of this acute crisis of
Yeah.
corona?
I mean, honestly, I'll give you some observations. I don't know. I mean, what do I know, right? If I knew those things, I'd be richer. I will say, I got a call from a really sharp leader, friend of mine, like you guys. He leads down in the Southwest United States, a thriving ministry like you have at Emergence. And he said, "Did you read the blog of so and so?" And I went on and read it, and then I called him back and I said, "You know what? Some of these guys need to stop blogging because, like, I love people who blog but don't lead anything."
Hmm.
Because I said some of what he says is good observation. Some of it, like, how does he know anything? He doesn't even lead anything. And so but then they get all these pastors worked up. These guys are trying to lead a ministry. Now they're worked up, like, oh my word, we just finished a new building. Is anybody coming ever? Are we ever going to have a church building use again? And I said to him, yeah, we are. Like, church buildings will be occupied again. They may not be occupied the same way, and they may not be occupied with the same capacity. They will be occupied again, right? You're hearing right now what's going to happen in commercial real estate, right? Because the big companies aren't sending their people back, and open floor plans now became a nightmare. Those who built, the cubicle model is your worst case scenario for COVID. So you have companies of 30. I've talked to companies that have 30,000, one that has 18,000. Like, their people aren't going back anytime soon because they can't. It's just not feasible. Those buildings weren't designed for an infectious disease. And so it will change commercial real estate. But the reality is, someday those companies are going to get back as well to some normalcy, and people will go back to work. I do think we will see more people working from home. Is that going to be 100%? No. We will see people more comfortable online. What I really think is going to happen is we will see a trend that was already going has probably been accelerated. And that is, people who go to Emergence are going to go, Emergence will be their church. They're just going to be not there all the time. And you've already seen that, right? This is just going to compound it. They're going to be part of Emergence, but the only difference is you're going to say, you're part of Emergence whether you're in this building or not. Whereas before, we only counted who's in the building. And now COVID has caused us to say, no, we're counting out there because nobody's in the building. And I think that's a good change for us. That if we're truly going to view our online ministry as real ministry and not pretend ministry, not second class, second rate, we are going to have to view them as part of our community and treat them that way. That might change the way we staff. That might change how much we put into doing a really good quality online ministry. We pastor those people. Those people might come out once a week, once a month. They might come out twice a month. But the idea of coming out every week to church, which was already on decline in North America, I think that trend has been accelerated.
I think there's maybe more compassion around what you're saying too. We had been talking about going online for years, and then we went online in about a week. So we went from having no online service to the next week having one. And I was amazed. I got emails from family members who lived in Maryland, who their church background is all over the place, but they have children with autism, and she was so grateful to be able to watch a service. And I think, and I might lump myself into this, that before all this, I might have said, come on, if you're committed, you're just going to come. And now I realize there's going to be people compromised. There's going to be people older who are maybe more committed than I ever would have been. I think of my family member with children with autism. She might be more committed than the people who show up regularly. And so it just changed my lens through those who watch church online. Will some people maybe take advantage of it? Sure. But is that worth not doing it? I don't think so anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's, rather than us being the judge and jury, let's provide as many opportunities to reach as many people as possible for the gospel. And let them decide what's best for them. That some people, I remember in teaching in higher education years ago, sitting in meetings where, uh, you know, higher education is known for arrogance, right? Because all these PhDs really know a lot, and supposedly. And I remember, hearing faculty like, that is not a real education. Real education is, me being able to pontificate in front of my little disciples. And then all of a sudden, those schools 15 years later were so far behind the curve, because all of a sudden you had the Columbias, the Harvards, you had the Carnegie Mellons, you had major universities that all were providing online platforms. And then you had some of these little institutions that were saying, well, uh-oh, we better catch up here. And it was hard to play catch up, right? I think the church has been the same way. Online is not real church. Parallel, right? You got to be face to face. You got to be real. And there is something different, right? There's no question. Even in education, there's some things that you trade off. But we have been able to get education to people more quickly, right? Think about people in the military who now are able to start taking classes online because universities said, we're going to bring education to you. No matter where you are in the world, we will not stop you from getting an education. And church is now the same way, right? Versus, well, it's not real church. If it's not real church, what have we been doing for the past 4 months? We've been make-believe. And so I think it is sober to everybody to say, this can be a very legitimate ministry opportunity.
Yeah, and it doesn't minimize the reality of the need for community,
right?
Minimize the reality of the need for discipleship. I'm curious, Jay, as you look at what churches are trying and doing in the middle of all this, what are just some of the innovations you're seeing, not just for services, but for things like discipleship, things like community, and obviously Zoom communities and things like that. But are you seeing any other trends outside of even just the Sunday gatherings?
I can't say trends because I think everybody's still experimenting, and and it takes a while to create a trend. And so we're infants in this whole thing still when you think about real trend setting. But I do think people are innovative. And more innovation comes out of crisis than ever does out of sitting in a meeting and saying, let's innovate. And so I think, I remember one time we were driving out to my daughter's, helping her move into her new apartment out near York, Pennsylvania. And my wife and I were driving on a Route 30, and it's 282, and we looked to the right and said, look at that. There's a church that's closed, and under a tree were 10 people gathered in chairs doing ministry together with each other. And I'm thinking, people find ways to do, right? To do things that are, outside spaces, we know are safer than inside spaces. And so all the scientists have said that, right? This is, the worst case scenario is a lot of people indoors, close proximity for extended periods of time. What is a church? That's us, guys, right? That's what we do.
Singing.
And singing, which is, like icing on the cake or poison on the cake,
Yeah.
And so people have innovated and they found ways to do things. My neighborhood's a really tight-knit neighborhood. We are close friends and we do a lot of stuff together. And we every year we do a big cornhole competition. Well, that was Saturday night, and this year, instead of holding it in someone's yard, we held it down at the end of the street in the cul-de-sac. Instead of being everybody brings a bunch of food to share, everybody brought their own meal, right? So you accommodate, you adjust, you tweak things to reduce risk, but still have community.
Yeah.
And I think churches are doing that. Those that can do outdoors, some of them are utilizing outdoor spaces because it's a little, it's a lot safer. Some are doing indoors, but they're spreading people throughout their building. Some people are sticking online, but finding other ways to help their people stay connected. And I just think it's just really a constant experiment, but I haven't seen trends, because trends mean something that's worked and starts to get traction and has been tried enough to be earning the title of trend. But I will tell you, people are experimenting, and I like that. I think good things will come out of that.
Yeah, it was interesting when this whole thing first started. I've talked to a few people about this and said this where we are now is so much harder than when all this began. Because when all this began, there was no choice. It forced innovation quickly. There really was no other option. The clear solution was we've got to move online as fast as we can. And as Ryan said, we weren't fully prepared to go online yet, but we had to hit go.
Mm.
And there was no debate. It was like, all right, we've got to get online because we need to be a church. We need to be the church together. And so the harder part of this is on the back end of the initial. There's no debate, there's no question. Now you have all this dispersion of interpretation of what's right now.
Yeah.
And this is the much harder part because, like you said, there's all kinds of pressures, and it's weird the pressure you feel. And this is where it is hard. Like you said, Andy Stanley going, "Hey, listen, this is what we're going to do, and it's based out of values." The pressure you feel because other people are making decisions, and people's responses to those decisions are creating pressures, and yet they're so varied, and who knows what's motivating a lot of those decisions. Uh,
Yeah. I think a lot of pressure is being put on leaders right now. Whether it's over, and part of it is extra challenging because there's so many divergent opinions in culture where this has become more than a public health issue. This is also the way I view it is, we have such an erosion of trust right now in our culture, in things that are really important. Trusting public health, trusting politicians, believe it or not, trusting pastors, trusting, and nobody trusts these institutions. And man, that's a scary place to be because, that means every man for themselves, every woman for themselves. Like, everybody just makes their own decisions. And I don't think that's probably the better part of wisdom in a public health crisis. I really believe that every church is going to make their own decision, but they need to make it based on values, not pressure. The pressure of we got to get people back together. Everybody wants to get back together. We're going to go find another church if we don't. Some of those people might just need to go find another church. That's okay. There are people that probably watched Emergence online because their church doesn't do online very well. And this is the first time they had a chance to skip out of their own church without getting caught, right? And so the body of Christ is bigger, and let people benefit from that. Yeah, maybe some people come to Emergence because you do online really well. You have great teaching and great music. And maybe somebody needs a live experience. Maybe they go find one. But it doesn't mean every church has to do that. Because look, inside ministry is just going to be complex at best and strange in some ways. As I shared with somebody recently who was asking why we haven't opened up indoors yet and was not, happy about that. I said, I want you to understand when we do open up indoors, you will be wearing a mask and we will be asking you to leave the building immediately. So if you're looking for fellowship, it's not going to be happening there. You're going to have to still find another way to get that. And that's where I think if we can help people find ways to gather in smaller environments, in safer locations, outdoors, it probably becomes a good supplement to the online experience without the pressure to go indoors when you just don't feel ready to do it. And I'd encourage any leader, don't do it until you know you can do it well. Don't do it until you can do it well.
Well, the great thing is if churches are making decisions out of values and someone chooses to connect with a church because the values that they're making decisions out of they resonate with, then perhaps they'll be even more connected with the mission of that church and what that church is doing. And so, if the live in-person thing is where their values are, then maybe they'll be far more effective, far more passionate, plugging in a live service right now.
I have a friend who runs a very large nonprofit, and they really reach thousands of people every year, especially young people. And they were having to make a decision of whether they were going to be able to open this summer or not. And they were not allowed to open this summer But even if they were, and they had thought through how to do it safely, um, the CEO is a phenomenal visionary and courageous leader. And I remember him saying to me, even if we can open, I'm not sure I will open. That would mean a $6 million loss. But he said, I'm not sure we're doing that unless I know we could do it based on our values and our DNA. We have a way we do things. If we can't do it reasonably like that, then I'm not sure I want to open. And he didn't. And I think he's stood by that decision. Hard decision, right? I mean, think about that. That's a scary decision to make. But I think this is testing leaders' courage. This is testing our courage.
Jane, you said something really helpful just before for me, is just help people even think through, well, what is it you want, and realize you're not going to get that. You know, if you want a big congregation again, that's not going to be there. If you want fellowship, that's not going to be there in this season. And I think people just, it's not their fault. They just don't realize sometimes some of the complexities. You know, we got a few emails that said, how about a car service? And you know, you think of this week sitting inside your car, like people would be dying. You know, there's cool innovations and we're going to innovate, but I think, you know, just helping people understand some of the complexities of why normal is going to be back in the near future for them.
And I think for you guys as pastors, you know, this is a time for every Christian to ask themselves, why do I feel I need what I need? You know, what is it about my own faith and my own experience and my own internal needs that, like, there are times when I think people need to be stronger and more courageous in their personal life. And that is, we are capable. I mean, some people have this innate need that I have to be together to worship, but they never stop and ask themselves, what is that? What does God say about that? You know, does that what God says, or is that what I'm feeling? You know, and so I just think people need to. This is a great time to do a little bit of reflection, both for us as leaders, but also for people in their own faith community, and why they feel the way that they feel. Why do they need what they feel like they need? But there will not be a one size fits all. You know, there is no one thing that's going to bring emergence, for example, back together. You're going to have diversity of population and a diversity of solutions.
You know, that's not new. Remember that decision we made when everyone said that was the best decision ever?
I'm still waiting.
I always think they're great.
Yeah. And that's a great point, Jay, because I think what it does reveal is what church has become for people, you know, and the thing that becomes the non-negotiable in your brand of church, you know, for a person, that's what becomes, well, we have to do this, you know, or else we're not, I'm not having church, you know, and so I think this exposes some of those things. And, you know, where somebody, you know, who comes to Totowa and goes, man, I like just being in the room and it's electric and there's all these people and, you know, I love the energy and the life there. Well, that's not the church. You know, like that. Look, that's what God for a season has made our church, that experience. You know, it's an aspect of what the experience has been. But you don't need that to be the church. And so when you think about meeting in someone's home and, you know, having a micro gathering in someone's home and taking communion together and praying together and be, you know, if that's not church to you, then you have to go back to the question of, well, where does God say this is church? You know, and so it does begin to expose some of those things, and it challenges what I think people are going to understand as church.
Yeah. And I think it's going to affect, in the long run, I think that very issue is going to affect programming. I think, you know, I think every church is going to have to really rethink staffing. And, you know, what do we hire staff to do? And, you know, what programs will be mission critical and are most likely to return? And which ones have become superfluous and are not going to return? During perfectly normal times, you coast along. But I don't think just like we said, commercial real estate's going to change. I do believe staffing levels will change.
Hmm. Yeah, and many times out of necessity. I mean,
Out of necessity. Well, it could be economic, or how do we deploy the resources we have, right? No church has unlimited resources. So it will force us to say, how do we leverage the resources we have for the greatest impact in the kingdom? And that's going to be I think that could be a really exciting discussion, but also probably scary one. But we know things have changed, right? I mean, all these programs that all churches that are large, like yours or mine or others run, there's still some programs taking place online and in creative virtual fashion, but we also know a lot of things can't happen right now. And one of the things I've been saying, I was saying this probably, I'm not prophetic in any way. I really wish I was. I think if I could buy one gift, that would be the one. But I've been saying this one for probably about 8 or 10 years, that churches need to build very flexible space, because even though all of these blogging prophets that are talking about how church will change forever, never be the same, et cetera, which I don't think is going to prove to be reality, but we do know some things will change, and churches that have the most flexible space are going to be able to adjust how they do ministry the fastest. And churches that over expand their space are going to have to figure out what to do with that brick and mortar real estate.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great call, and it's something we've been wrestling with. We've been in a campaign for
Yeah.
years now.
Well, in some ways, God may have actually. I mean, could be a gift for you, because you haven't put the final stake in the ground. This might say, now how do we think about buildings and design and space utilization? What is the future of Emergence going to look like, and how does that change in light of the fact that something called a pandemic really could happen?
Yeah.
Right? Because whoever would have thought of that in their building design plan? In
Yeah.
fact, here's an illustration. I was talking to an architect. Architects are trained in the COVID piece on how to use space safely. And so we were talking to an architect about our space in our auditorium. And she was saying, she goes, she's still surprised architects so often when they design commercial buildings, et cetera, put windows in that don't open, because we know fresh air is one of the best supports for avoiding COVID right now. But I have beautiful windows here, but they don't open. And so these sealed windows create sealed buildings. Mm-hmm. Very good for efficiency, very bad for pandemics.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. These things can be they're trials, but they also are what sometimes God uses to position us for more effective ministry. And that's the hope. Well, we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. Just thank you for your time, Jay. But as we do, I'm curious, is there anything that you're seeing right now through all this, that obviously there's trials people are walking through, but anything you're really excited about as you just look at where the church is right now, and just things you go, man, this is exciting, and maybe it's, as in your role, you get different things. You might have weird things that excite you, but what's exciting you about this?
One of the things that's exciting me is that I think crises are a great time to surface leaders. And one leader I'm coaching right now, he literally took the position of a large organization 40 days before COVID hit. But he's doing a phenomenal job. But he's also seen leaders rise up that prior would not have even been viewed as key players. And they went from here to here in a matter of 40 days. And I get excited about that. I really think leaders, it's during times of crisis that leaders step up or step out, right? And living in fear and anxiety, or saying, let's conquer it. Let's figure it out and let's conquer it. I love those kinds of people. And there's a lot of those people around, and you're probably even seeing those in Emergence right now. People who like to say, wow, like they're not afraid to tackle tough challenges and innovate. The other thing I get excited about is, this is one for me personally, that God does not struggle. He's probably he's the only person not on anxiety medication, or shouldn't be. Everybody struggles with anxiety to some level, right? We live in a world, the word fear is mentioned often in scripture. But God does not, struggle with sleeping disorders. He is okay, and he is going to accomplish his mission, right? The gates of hell will not prevail. Pandemics will not prevail. And I take great comfort in that. When we wake up someday, I was recently reading about the pilot and the plane that dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. I think about how can you get more devastating than that? And I saw pictures of Hiroshima after that bomb drop, of nothing left. And yet Hiroshima is a thriving city right now. Think about that. Things rebuild, things come back to life, and the church will prevail. And so I really get excited that God is in control, and we can join him on this journey of innovation, but the gospel will take shape. It's going to happen. People are going to come to Christ, and new ideas are going to bubble up in our churches. And some churches are going to thrive and grow and emerge out of this, and others will probably not. And this is going to be a time for some churches to humble themselves and merge. I think, and that's true in the nonprofit world as well. This is going to be a time for others to say, we have had our season. Let's entrust ourselves to the next troop that's going to take the battle forward.
And Jay, I love that you said before, there's this unique opportunity to finally do some of the things you thought. For some of those leaders, I imagine that thought's been a flag in the back of their mind for some time. And this just becomes a little bit of the kind of launch button for them to go, you know what, I finally have a really nice excuse. It might not be the right word, or opportunity to make this call.
Well, and you guys talked about online for you. Classic example, you guys, you went from 0 to 100. That probably could have taken you, a year or two to even get close to that without pressure. And so while we hate pressure is a phenomenal catalyst for change. And so in some ways, if we could embrace part of this rather than, step back or shudder from it, I think, the pressure could help our ministries be stronger than they ever were if we allow it to happen.
Yeah. Well, Jay, thank you so much for always your continued insight, the stuff we get offline from you, and then also the stuff that you got to share today here, and really grateful for you and just the way that you serve the church. I'm wondering, would you mind just praying for our church as we close out?
Oh, man, that'd be an honor. Glad to do that. Let's pray. Well, Father, thank you for this time to catch up with Ryan and Steve. Thank you for their faithfulness, not just now, but for many, many years, for their courage of taking steps of faith and not stepping back during the time of battle. Father, I pray for them even now as they have to make decisions in the coming weeks and months. We're all making decisions literally every day, it feels. Father, I pray first for them as individuals, for their families, for their marriage, that the stress of leading during this time does not become overbearing and overwhelming. I pray, Father, that you would shore them up and give them just that extra grit and grace that's needed to lead and lead well at this time. And Father, may they lead with courage. Humility and courage together make a powerful, powerful catalyst. And so, Father, I pray for them. I pray for the people of Emergence. We know that there are people who have died, and families that have been affected, and jobs that have been lost. And Father, we just pray that, during this time, you would make yourself known in ways greater than at any other time, because it's during times of brokenness and woundedness that you show up and that people are more receptive. So, Father, please make yourself known at Emergence. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
Guys, good seeing you, man. Great to see you. Always thinking of you.
Thank you so much.
Keep up the good work. Yeah.
You as well.
All right, bye-bye.